Welcome to the Frontline Herbalism podcast with your host Nicole Rose from the Solidarity Apothecary. This is your place for all things plants and liberation. Let's get started.
Hello, welcome back to the Frontline Herbalism podcast. Guess where I am? In a fucking car park. It's too hot in my herb shed and my dispensing assistant's in there, so I didn't have anywhere to go to record this. So I'm in the car park and it is boiling because it's a heat wave here, but I will imminently be going to work in a coffee shop, which is awesome with air conditioning. So yeah, how's everyone been? I have a corker of an interview for you today. So I have an interview with Soraya and Catriona from a crew called Grassroots Remedies. So they're based in Scotland and they're a workers' co-op, and they have just this like dreamy collection of offerings. So they have like a super accessible like grassroots community clinic within like an NHS kind of community building. They have like tons of community gardens. They were talking about an agroecology farm they're working with now. And yeah, I just think they're like a seriously inspiring example of not only like grassroots herbalism, but like a very kind of like organized, sustainable herbalism in terms of like how have they built livelihoods for themselves doing this work? Like how do they think about class and the areas they're working in? And yeah, how do they connect to their kind of like local bioregion and their ecology? And yeah, I think you're going to absolutely love it. So please enjoy that. I know I promised an interview where I was going to go like in depth talking about my one-to-one herbal practice, but you know what? I haven't made an official decision yet, or haven't drafted an announcement, but I think I'm gonna close my doors basically to new people just for like a month or 6 weeks so that I can have a little bit of a break, maybe have a bit of a trip away with my small human, and just kind of like serve the people I'm already serving at the moment, because I'm supporting a lot of people. And the way I work is like very kind of in-depth and high touch in the sense of like tweaking recommendations and getting different things out and having something for sleep and something for digestion and this supplement and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you know, I have like 12 hours nursery time a week. And if I need other childcare in other times, it's like a fucking ball ache to organise. Do you know what I mean? Like in terms of like grandparents or paying a childminder and then the cost and blah, blah, blah. So it's like, yeah, I just want to meet the people's needs who have like trusted me to support them. So I want to meet their needs. I'm also like onboarding 10 folks with the Rose program, which is like a collective program for people supporting someone in prison, whether that's like a family member, a comrade, or a loved one, or a partner. So yeah, that's quite kind of time consuming as well in terms of like one-to-one support, posting out medicines, like doing the recommendations, and then, you know, like the group calls and things. So yeah, I'm just trying to like put my shit into practice and be kind to myself, because anyone who's done any parenting or childcare, oh my God, why does no one tell you it's such fucking hard work? I'm just like broken by the end of the day. My child used to go to sleep at 6 o'clock. That was a fucking nice time. Thinking about it now, I had like 3 hours in the evening to myself, do work, catch up on emails, like work on the membership, maybe watch some trash. And now he goes to bed like 8:30, 9 because he's having a late afternoon nap after nursery, and he's not quite old enough to drop the nap. So I just have to deal with the fact that I don't have the evening time anymore. So I'm just kind of like, reorientating myself and the different offerings, and the PTSD course is like on the horizon as well. And that's like the backbone of the Solidarity Apothecary and funds like all the things, all the Black Flag stuff, like the Anarchist Free Clinic, all the herbal care packages. You need to make sure that all the different parts of my work are getting energy when they need it, if that makes sense. So I will record a podcast about how I work when it's the right time, because I'd hate for someone to listen to that, give it an hour of their life, and then be like, shit, I can't actually work with her. So anyway, I will release it at a later date, and I'm still planning on doing this series about medicine making. I had like a fantasy of just batch processing all the episodes. I booked the childminder in. I was like so excited. And then I got a text from a local grower being like, are you up for the chamomile and stuff again? And I was like, yeah, amazing. Because these herbs are like incredible. And then, like, I literally had to use all those childcare hours to process like 7 kilos of chamomile. I literally had like blisters on my hands. So anyway, I will have enough chamomile for like months to come, though. It's one of the herbs I include in my nervous system soother blends in the care packages. And it's like something I work with a lot with clients. So yeah. But that's just fucking herbalist life, isn't it? You just got to get on with it. Like, the herbs need harvesting when they need harvesting. Do you know what I mean? And it's just fucking brilliant to be able to even do that now. Like, I was really in the newborn trenches, struggling with, like, you know, even getting an hour or so to myself a week, let alone like running a business again. A business, you know what I mean? I'm in this like weird hybrid world of like, it's my livelihood, but it's also like a big solidarity apothecary kind of solidarity project. So I don't know. Anyway, I've been rambling, and you know what? I'm sweating my balls off in this car. So I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to go in the nice cool cafe and edit this and publish it. Thank you so much to the folks from Grassroots Remedies again for their time and energy. I'm going to put all the links to all the things in the show notes. And yeah, thanks so much for listening. Okay, take care. All right. So, hello. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Would you be able to introduce yourselves, your pronouns, like any other things you'd like to kind of include? And this podcast is all about your project, Grassroots Remedies. And I know you have like an amazing array of offerings. So after you've introduced yourselves, could you just give like a kind of bird's eye view as to what Grassroots Remedies are up to?
Yeah, so my name's Soraya, and I use she, her pronouns.
And I'm Catriona, and I also use she, her pronouns.
Yeah, and in terms of a bit of a kind of like what we're up to, or sort of like what kind of like sort of underpins what we do. We often have this you'll often kind of hear us say kind of folk medicine for all folk. And I guess what we mean by that is, well, a lot of us as co-op members have come from different or the same sort of like community organizing, sort of like in the past, and so for us, there's sort of like herbalism and environmental and social kind of justice work is kind of one in the same. Like we can't really have herbalism without that for us. So we basically spend a lot of our time sort of trying to reconnect folks to the age old tradition of herbalism. In the sense that I guess in the sort of present day, we're in this sort of like complete flip round in a Scottish context and rest of the UK and Ireland context. Like we're in this total flip round of the past, which was way back when if you were a wealthy person and you were looking for some healthcare, you would be able to pay to see a physician, and everyone else that couldn't afford to do that would be using the plants around them, and be sort of using the kind of folk tradition. And obviously today we have this context where we have a national health service, the NHS, which is sort of kind of free at the point of service sort of thing. And that kind of sets up then this kind of binary, which is that anything that isn't in the National Health Service is an alternative medicine or therapy, and then people have to pay for that. And usually it's folks that have a lot of expendable income, so it's usually it's kind of like available to the kind of like middle classes, let's say. And so we're the kind of core of our work, I guess, is trying to make herbalism kind of more accessible to more folks.
Amazing. And what does that look like in practice? Like, what are your different projects and the different threads of your work?
Well, I think one of the things it really looks like in practice is that we focus on particular plants, and we focus on plants that are like, we've got this kind of phrase that they're abundant to forage, inexpensive to buy, and easy to grow. And I think that gives us the opportunity to really connect people with the plants that are around them. But we kind of include in that the plants that you can just pick up in your local shop or supermarket. Like, we're not trying to be exclusive about you've got to grow everything, you've got to forage everything. It's like, get some garlic and ginger on the go and some chili and all that kind of stuff. So we're trying to make things accessible in whatever that means to people, but also use those conversations about accessibility to like explain to people why there's a sort of social and environmental background to this, and that there's a political background to this, and that the plants that we have access to, it's not an accident that we have access to some plants and not access to others, and just sort of bringing that in as well. And one of the ways that we increase the accessibility of what we offer is that we have a lot of our offerings which are free or low cost at the point that people access them. So that way that Soraya was saying about the NHS being like, there's always this thing of they're free at the point of access. But we think that's that can be a really good model to get people into herbal medicine, and that includes things like our low-cost clinics and free workshop programs that we run around the clinics, and that's for folk in an area of Edinburgh called Wester Hailes. And it's very specific to people from that area. But then we also have kind of free to access things in our volunteer sessions, which are open to kind of a broader amount of folk. And then obviously we do also have higher cost offerings and use a sliding scale model for that, and look for other ways to support folk financially to access some of our kind of larger courses. And that could be through bursaries and grants and all kinds of different things. I suppose the advantage is like my background is working in a little bit of that area, so it can be helpful if you've got a wee eye for some of these things. But yeah, overall just trying to kind of make things financially accessible, but also having a sort of accessibility of what plants we actually use.
Amazing. So you're having different courses and different workshops, and you've got your clinics, and then you've got community gardens, right? Is there any, not that that's not like shitloads to do, but is there anything else that's kind of like part of the Grassroots Remedies kind of ecosystem?
I'd say that's definitely like our sort of like main offerings, low cost clinics, the kind of educational arm, and then kind of bringing folks to like you say, community gardens, or quite a large like part of what we get up to these days is being based on an agroecology farm called the Lauriston Agroecology Farm in North West Edinburgh, where we're kind of I guess sort of slowly scaling up the kind of plants that we're growing, that then closes loops in terms of as being able to grow and process more of our own plants that then go into our workshops or courses with students and our clinics and things like that.
Amazing. So tell me about the clinics. Like I've always I remember meeting Ali, who's another member of your workers co-op, actually outside the toilet at the Radical Herbalism gathering that was on the land where I live, like back in like 2013 or something. And
Wow.
I think she just started this clinic, the Wester Hailes clinic. Sorry if I've pronounced that wrong, but I know it sits like alongside, or like it's in a kind of like National Health, like NHS building or something. But I just wondered, like, can you share a little bit more about the clinics and how you've made them so accessible, and I guess just out of like sheer curiosity, like how they are kind of like financially sustained?
It's nice to think back to like the Radical Herbal gatherings were like big source of inspiration, so it's just nice to think of you bumping into Ali outside the toilet in 2014 or whatever in that beautiful place. We opened it, so you pronounced it right. We opened the Wester Hailes Community Herbal Clinic in 2015. And it's essentially, it sits inside this kind of big multi-agency building in Edinburgh. It's in the southwest of Edinburgh, this neighbourhood, Wester Hailes. And the building's called the Wester Hailes Healthy Living Centre. And inside that, there are like a range of different sort of council services, and there's also the Wester Hailes GP practice, and there's also a couple of charities. And one of the charities is called the Health Agency, and the Health Agency offers like various forms of counselling and various therapies to local residents, and things like cooking groups and gardening groups and like various kind of support groups. It's it's basically once a week, every Wednesday, we, Grassroots Remedies, like hire a room to run our clinic from inside the health agency, which sits inside the West Hales Healthy Living Centre. It's like a big, the layers of the onion. So that's kind of a bit of a like, physically placing it. And yeah, we sort of essentially, like back in 2015, essentially what happened was Ali and one of the other medical herbalists in the clinic, Catherine, just kind of like got in touch with different sort of health, kind of community health centres around Edinburgh, and kind of, part by chance, part because they kind of knew us already. The health agency said yes. Myself and Rona, another co-op member, were also like community gardeners working in that agency at the time as well. So there were some like kind of quite strong links with the community and some of the workers there. And so, the clinic opens one day a week, and we get referrals from some of those other kind of like kind of groups within the health agency, and we also get referrals from the GPs as well. And I would say like it's like we have had to be adaptive over time running it, so that it, because it obviously isn't like the most lucrative business model. That's not why we're doing it. And so we've certainly changed things, and like I'm sure they'll probably change again in the future as unforeseen things happen or whatever. So for example, one thing was like when we first opened the clinic, we had a sliding scale for local residents, and we had a different sliding scale for like local staff and volunteers of the area that worked there but maybe didn't live there. And that was so confusing to people, understandably. So you could imagine that like one scenario, let's say, of someone like coming to see the Grassroots Remedies like herbalist is like, something's going on for them. They just go and see their doctor, and then for whatever reason, the doctor says, "Hey, I think maybe the herbalists might be able to like really support you in this time. So, like, let's walk down the corridor and make an appointment." And then maybe that person is suddenly sitting in a herbal appointment without really potentially having no sort of background knowledge of what herbalism is, and then suddenly they're being asked to pay if they can, and pay on a sliding scale, which they may or may not have ever heard of before. So we realized we were just basically confusing the hell out of people. So like now we have just like a flat rate for local residents, which is like £10 an appointment. We have a higher sliding scale rate for other folks, and we're kind of like seeing how that goes. In reality, we don't kind of like chase folks if they don't pay us, but we try and get that £10. So that's definitely been like, I would just say like a constant work in progress of like what is the least confusing and the most accessible that we can manage, and like balancing all these things. And then like I would say another big like change with the West Hales clinic is that like in the early years, I would say we would spend like quite a lot of time in the winter, when the growing season is when there's less plants growing around us. We would spend lots of time like writing funding applications. And the clinic, because it's this kind of like medical healthcare, just sits in this really grey area, and like not many people want to fund it. We have like other parts of our work that are much more easily funded. Like remedy making workshops in community gardens, like that sort of thing. But the clinic's quite tricky, and so although we never really actually ever started out to do this, we decided that we would basically make a small product range, and that those products would specifically be sold to like raise money for the clinic. So like today we have these like some tincture blends and some tea blends and a cream and a few other things that people can like buy through our website or in a few shops, or like if the times we have more capacity, maybe we're on like local stalls in around the Scottish Central Belt. But that was quite a big like change, and interestingly, it like a few things happened, but like in some ways it started from the GPs in that in probably, let's think now, maybe about 2018-ish time. One of the GPs that we were more in like communications with was saying, hey, it'd be really cool if like there was some really like a maybe like a joint balm or like a cream for this, that like people that could just like get them from behind the counter in the health agency. Some things that we could like recommend to people that are like quite just quite useful, and like maybe we could make like a bunch of them at one time, sort of thing. And that kind of sparked this idea to begin with. And then through kind of COVID, when we couldn't see people in the clinics in person or run, workshops inside and things like that, we were lucky enough to get some funding to run what we called the Herbal Response Project, which was us basically making various like syrups and teas that we thought would help people either with the kind of some of the symptoms of having COVID, or just like generally being helpful in like living in that time of COVID and all the stress that like surrounded it. We were giving out these blends alongside like free meals in the neighbourhood, also in the northeast of Edinburgh, and in another neighbourhood. And that sort of, when that time was over, this kind of all culminated in us thinking, oh, maybe it is a good idea for us to just make some products that are widely available, and this can like directly sustain the clinic. So yeah, maybe there's more I could say, but that, I guess the point of what I'm saying is like we've definitely had to be adaptable and just like try and survive and try out new things as we've gone along.
Amazing. And I think that's why I'm so curious about the clinic, because it is so kind of like long lasting, because like so many projects sort of like start and finish. And I mean, I agree that like things change all the time, like with the clinic in Calais, like we couldn't have designed it, if that makes sense. You kind of have to get stuck in and then develop things from there. But just for folks who aren't like aware, like like lots of people listen to this from like the so-called US and stuff, like what's the kind of like local area like where you're serving in terms of like class or like health inequalities? Just to give a like bit of a picture.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question, because I think there's like a number of class elements in the work that we do. And so like Wester Hills itself is a predominantly working class area. And it's also, there's this thing of people perceiving herbal medicine as maybe being quite like a middle upper class pursuit. And then there's also, I suppose, a broader factor that I wonder if folk are listening from maybe outside of Scotland, outside of the UK, possibly have a bit of an idea of Edinburgh itself as being this like architecturally beautiful place, and there's all these historic buildings and tourist attractions. And that's like, if you've been someone who's visited Edinburgh, unless you're visiting people who if you're visiting just as kind of tourist, that's probably the side of the city that you've seen. But I think like many big cities, there's a huge contrast, and we've got this sort of like shiny photogenic side that is shown to the rest of the world. And then in Edinburgh, I think particularly in the outskirts, although I'm actually like I'm based in Glasgow, so I feel like my organic knowledge of Edinburgh isn't quite the same. But my perception of Edinburgh is that there's the shiny affluent bit in the city centre, and then everyone's been kind of pushed to the outskirts. And there's a lot of places where that have been like really under-resourced, and the infrastructure has really been basically actively left to decline. Last year, there was like massive cuts to funding. There was possibility that the Healthy Living Centre where we were based was going to have to close, and things got turned around with like kind of the public getting involved. But there's just not a lot there. Some of like the Healthy Living Centres, an absolutely amazing resource for people. But yes, I think the contrast is that in these more wealthy parts of the city, there are lots of options in terms of like safe, walkable streets and green spaces, a wide array of options for food that are affordable to people, whereas in more working class areas, the access to safe outdoor space is really limited, the variety of affordable food is extremely limited, and you hear things being like kind of bandied about in statistics about the difference between life expectancy in that one neighborhood that's literally right next to another neighborhood, and that potentially people are like living for 10 years less or 10 years more, very much based on their postcode, which is like zip code for people in other places. But basically, your neighborhood can really dictate how your life progresses. And somewhere like Wester Hailes, there's a lot of people working to kind of get beyond that and to work with what is there and support folk who are there, and people who live there working to support their neighbours. It's really difficult though, because there's not being a lot put into that area. And there's historically, that's a thing in big cities. I know across the UK, I guess I know the UK context better than anywhere, but I feel like it's probably in quite a lot of places. And then when we're talking about bringing herbal medicine into somewhere, I think that's really magnified by the fact that people do think of herbal medicine as being this like thing that you do in a rural or semi-rural area, and especially something like foraging, you've got to have a homestead with acres of land, and it's not something that you can do in an urban setting when you've got no money at all. So I think that's like that class context is sort of broader, but also really specific to what we're doing in Wester Hailes. And again, it's sort of reflected in our approach to trying to really highlight and support people to get to know plants that are around them and that are abundant and that are easy to find any way that is. But it's a big deal in Wester Hailes.
Thanks so much for sharing that. And the discipline it takes to not ask like 5,000 questions in certain directions. But just like one, I guess, last question about the clinic. Like I'm very interested in how like local folks have like found it. Like you mentioned, like I totally agree that everyone perceives herbalism as like very middle class. But I'm also really interested in this like relationship to the NHS and the doctors and like the referrals. So yeah, if you could speak to that a little bit, I'd be super curious.
Can I say to that, I would give a one word answer and then expand upon it. And I wonder if Soraya agrees with me on that. But my one word answer is Gillian. And my expansion on that would be Gillian works with us, and she started off as a patient in our Wester Hailes clinic. She's a local to Wester Hailes and has become more and more involved with us on her journey with herbal medicine. She's she's involved as a patient and as a volunteer. She's been involved in a lot of our workshops, come on a lot of our courses, and then developed into actually like she is the person who runs the local workshops in Wester Hailes. And it is her and her force of personality that gets people in those workshops and gets people from those workshops into coming to clinic. And she's also recently qualified as a herbalist herself through the plant medicine school. So she is now a herbalist of our clinic. So it's like a really amazing sort of almost too good to be true kind of story. Like she is a real person, honestly. We are not making her up. But yeah, so that is a big factor is in the kind of ongoing continuity of the clinic is that you just need to get yourself a Gillian. That's the answer. Get yourself a Gillian. So she's amazing. We've all worked with her for years, and she really takes the workshops forward. Now really involved in the clinic. Not to say that we absolutely do get referrals from other agencies, and so from the NHS as well. But also a lot of that has to do with the relationships that Gillian has with all of the other agencies that are involved in the Healthy Living Centre. She's worked in different ways in those patchwork of jobs that's probably really familiar to lots of people who are listening, and to yourself, Nicole. Any of us have been freelance or self-employed, but Gillian has consistently been part of the Healthy Living Centre and part of Wester Hailes life for a very long time. And I think that is it's not a simple thing to do to find yourself a Gillian, but that is the kind of thing that makes this work, is that there is somebody on the ground who people know, who people trust, and who is extremely passionate about like talking to people about herbal medicine and sharing information and running workshops. So yeah, it's kind of it's a slightly impossible thing to replicate because we can't clone her. It wouldn't be ethical. But that would be my encouragement is if folk are interested in doing this kind of work is you need to find somebody on the ground, or if you can, who people know and who has the capacity, because it's a lot to ask a person as well to be that person. It's really difficult. And yeah, she's been absolutely amazing. So yeah, that is the answer to how it works.
Yeah, thanks, Catriona. It's so true. And I think, on the kind of like other side of that, with like the relationship specifically with like, the GP practice, for example, I feel like it's generally been really positive. And it's kind of funny to think back to 2015, I think, when Ali and Catherine, who I mentioned earlier, first opened the clinic. They were like, they decided they were going to go and like talk to the GPs, and they were like really like, a bit like nervous and like, okay, this is it, we're going to like try and like win over the, the other medical professionals sort of thing. And we're a bit like bricking it, and then went into this meeting, and the GP practice were like super welcoming, and were like basically like, oh, you clearly don't know how like forward thinking and like brilliant we are, sort of thing. So, I think there's a certain amount of that which is like luck of individuals being in that GP practice at like a particular time. And it's definitely like, I would say we definitely go through periods of having less referrals from the GPs and more referrals from the GPs. And I think that sometimes reflects like staff changeover and maybe like individuals' interests and things. But I guess at the end of the day, like so many GP practices, like Wester Hailes is, the practice is incredibly like under-resourced and overstretched. And so I think they can see the benefit of kind of working together. And there's definitely been like occasions when we know with the sort of patients, consent, obviously, that like sort of communications, like notes on the sort of patient's kind of situation and like healthcare have been shared between the medical practice and the medical herbalists. If it's like, of the benefit of the individual sort of thing, and they're up for that. So it's kind of really interesting. And I guess another thing to say is this has always been the case since we started running courses in 2016. But as time goes on, it's quite interesting to us to see the number of kind of like NHS staff coming onto our courses, our sort of like herbal medicine foraging courses. And I feel like your class this year, Catriona, in Glasgow was like, there were so many medical professionals on it. And, for us, that's just amazing because we have such rich conversations, and, they bring so much to the classes as well. So it's nice to see so much like crossover.
Amazing. Yeah, I think like, I've seen it with, I actually had one local GP, but he worked there just for a few months, and he would refer people to our community garden all the time because he was just frustrated seeing how it was like near enough always like nutrition or like lack of movement and stuff, like other than fucking like class and stuff. But he was always frustrated with the tools he had, if that made sense, of like, like he could only give someone this particular medication, but really he wanted them to like, change their diet or whatever. So we had quite a good relationship when I used to do this, like community food growing kind of workers co-op back in the day. It's really interesting to hear about that relationship. I'm going to ask about growing shortly because I know you're both very like passionate growers, but just on the topic of kind of like funding and how you make things happen. And sounds like Gillian is absolutely like amazing and like rooted in the community there. Like, I guess like I'm coming out of like a decade of workers co-ops, and it was an experience. Like some stuff was absolutely amazing, and I'm sure much more amazing than like working for fucking Tesco's or something. But like there were also like lots of challenges, and I'm now kind of like solo self-employed, I guess, but I'm just being really nosy about like what it's like as a workers co-op for you all, like in terms of division of labor or like paying yourselves like a living wage. So yeah, please, yeah, feel free to share like whatever you feel comfortable sharing. I'm just shamelessly curious and interested.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, I think it's all the things and like a lot of lessons over time. I think in the sort of like early days of the co-op or early years of the co-op, we were sort of all doing everything, which was quite nice in terms of like skill sharing and skilling up, but was just like way too much. So I would say there's like generally been a trend as we have grown, over time of like each having a bit more of a like specialized roles sort of things. Even though it still seems like we still have endless meetings and still are probably slightly over involved in everything, but it's still, it's kind of going that way, which is a good lesson to learn. As is like learning about knowing like what our skills are and what they aren't, and like when should we skill up and do a thing, and when should we just be like, what, let's just get another person to do this. So like an example of that is we have some tech support from the wonderful Yarrow at Pinkwell Studio, who like they're up in Fife and they work with kind of like values led businesses. And there's definitely been over the years a lot of like picking up the phone and being like, Yarrow, help us, which, is like probably 2 minutes of their time and like hours of hours. So yeah, stuff like that, really important. And I think, I think as well, like, I guess, just that it's sort of investing in relationships, take on things. So like before forming the co-op, like we all knew each other as like friends, or maybe that we'd been like organized with each other in the past, or we'd worked with each other in the past. And so I think there is something about the fact that we all work with each other, but I think, we all also really like love each other as well, not to get too soppy. So like when, shit hits the fan a bit, I feel like we are trying to all take care of each other in it. And although it would be much nicer to do even more of this, like we do, try to make time to like socialize a little bit as well, and like invest in our like just independent relationships with each other, as well as just talking about, the fact that the website's broken again, what we're going to do, or things like that. So yeah, I feel like that's like definitely a strong thing. And I think as well, maybe there's also that thing that is, the longer you exist and the longer that you have worked with various community groups in Edinburgh and Glasgow, and you have those like personal connections with people, that over time you're just building up your reputation of being like good to work with or reliable, and so then more kind of like funding channels almost open with like collaborations with different people, or things like that. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, as I said before, like a quite a large part of what we do is now based on this Lauriston Agroecology Farm, and there are a few different like projects here, and many of them are co-ops. So we're also kind of a co-op surrounded by co-ops, which is really cool. I love it because I do love co-ops, but it's also interesting to see sometimes that like points of other like small organizations possibly reflecting back on what you are also doing, but are slightly less aware of it, like getting a lot of voluntary time over, the time that you're paid for and stuff. And I think that's also this blurry line, isn't it? When like your work is also like your passion, you want to spend your Friday night tincturing all the beautiful herbs that have just perfectly come into flower before they go over next week or whatever. But Obviously there's like lines and boundaries that we're like continuously learning from all that. So yeah, I don't know if that like really answers your questions, but yeah, it was a bit of a roundabout answer to some stuff maybe.
Yeah, no, that's like super kind of like, I think, aligned with what I was doing, especially in like one of the workers' co-ops. But I think this thing of having existing relationships, I feel like if I'd had that with a few of the people I worked with, that would have like prevented a lot of stress. So yeah, I love how like relational everything is. So yeah, in terms of like what really comes across from your work is just this like beautiful connection to the land, and yeah, this like concept of like closing the gap and trying to source plants locally. So yeah, could you share a little bit more about this kind of like bioregional type approach and how your kind of community gardens and like growing spaces and now this farm, oh my God, how exciting is that? Like, how is that all kind of like feeding into the work of Grassroots Remedies?
Okay, well, the farm excitement is real. You must come and visit. That's the first thing to say. It's an absolutely amazing space. And I'm, for people who don't know Scotland, I'm based quite far away from the farm here in Glasgow and love to get over as often as I can, which is never often enough. It's so, so beautiful. But I'm wondering, like, if folk haven't come across the idea of a bioregional approach, or like what we mean by it, because other people maybe mean other things as well. But we're focusing on plants that thrive growing in like our location. And I think using the term bioregional feels quite good because it doesn't have the sort of like othering, slightly racist element of some horticultural terms you get, like native and non-native and invasive. It's like we're not, trying to move away from that and think about like what actually thrives in this environment. So back to that, like things are abundant to forage and easy to grow, and especially when they like offer an alternative to plants that are at risk or endangered, because we're also trying to like just be on this line of like not wanting to say don't ever use this plant, but trying to use plants as sensitively as possible, or to look for alternatives whenever there's plants that we feel like, there are some ethical issues around using that. So like the practical examples of that are for like forage plants. We have like Rona, who's got this beautiful pet-free garden in coastal Fife. So has like abundant daisies that she can harvest, and we can make into an infused oil and then use that instead of using arnica, which is kind of at risk. And then in our growing sites, we had Ali started growing some black cohosh in her garden in Edinburgh, and we now have it on Lauriston Farm. And then we can harvest the black cohosh roots after the 3 to 5 years that you need to have it in the ground before you harvest it. And we can harvest it, and we can harvest some of it and replant some other bits. And that means that we're not buying in black cohosh root, which is an amazing remedy, absolutely wonderful remedy, but is difficult to buy sustainably. So we're trying to like just find these ways of like approaching the plants so that we're not putting things out as not being an option, but we're looking at what are the sustainable options and how we can grow things in a way that's as sympathetic to the plants and to the land. And also sort of connecting people with the land is part of that bioregional approach as well, is that, there's absolutely nothing wrong with buying in dried herbs, and lots of people do. And like, I am currently drinking some red clover tea from red clover that I bought because it was so wet in Scotland last summer. I didn't manage to forage any. So like really not wanting to like dried herbs shame people, but at the same time, something about having that like connection with the living thing is really important, and is something that we like kind of put into that approach. It's like trying to like this idea that plants and people are so different from each other, whereas we're all part of this bioregion, and that folk can connect with plants as they are living. And it also doesn't need to be an extractive, I've got to harvest so much of this plant and then I'm going to use it. And you can actually just sit with a plant, and that's something that we encourage people to do on our volunteer sessions and in some of our like in-person courses, especially something like Plant Allies, when we look at like a big deep dive into one plant a month. But just connecting, like that connection is really important. And then also the connection through remedy making. I wonder if this is like something that maybe, Nicole, you recognise from your work, but if you're trying to make like herbal medicines on any kind of, even like quite a medium or to large scale, that idea of many hands make light work is like a huge thing. Like having people, extra folk and volunteers and students with us to like lending extra hands, especially when we're making tinctures from roots, like root tinctures, all of the digging, all of the scrubbing. You always manage to pick a day when it was, certainly in Scotland, when it's slightly too cold to be scrubbing roots outside, but that's what you've decided that you're doing. And it's good to have a little group of people who can do that and who can kind of help us out with that. So yeah, we're kind of bringing the medicines of where we are, and bringing people to the medicines. That is also a loop for us that we feel like is really important to close. But yeah, definitely having lots of folk involved with remedy making is a big key for us, I would say.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I remember in the beginning of the pandemic, my stepdad is nearly 80. Actually, he's 80 now, but he was shielding. And so like I just couldn't have anyone come to help. So I remember just making like hundreds and hundreds of things, and just that exhaustion of doing it on your own versus with a crew. So yeah, I really love that you've got all these different kind of like ways that people can feed in, and like ways that people can connect. And I think you'll know, like, from all of your work, like, we just hit this hurdle all the time of like we just don't have that kind of like inherited knowledge about herbalism. Like, you know, like you grow up, or at least I grew up without, you know, like access to a garden, or you know, like there's this romantic view of you'll learn all this stuff from your grandmother or whatever, and it just wasn't real for me. So I can really see how like herbal education is like really, really important. And I know that's another big thread of your work. So I'm really sorry about time pressure, but I just wondered, yeah, it feels really important to hear about what you're doing, because I know you have lots of local workshops, but you also have some online offerings that listeners might be interested in participating in. So yeah, could you just share a little bit more about the sort of like, yeah, like the popular education kind of work you're doing?
Oh, absolutely. And that's such a good point that you made about people just assume that you learn from your granny. I have this thing that I fess up to people sometimes, that in 2012, I started foraging, and I also started teaching about foraging. But I'd done a 4-year degree in herbal medicine, and I'm quite good at bluffing. So that's how I got away with it. But I think people do, like, I'm really trying to like say to people early on, maybe not quite so honestly, but will say like, I didn't learn about this as a kid. My parents picked blackberries. That's about it. So I think it's really helpful to like have that in people's minds, that it's not this, that there is an ancestral knowledge, but we didn't all get the benefit of it. But yeah, our online courses, we've got quite a range. We've basically got like things that are suitable for someone who's like a total beginner, just want to do something anytime, anywhere online. So we've got a kitchen herbal medicine course, which is like totally beginner friendly, all ages. It's me in my kitchen, filmed by Soraya, with occasional cameos from my adorable Jack Russell bear. And yeah, it's just a really introductory course. It's using stuff that people should have in their kitchens in terms of equipment. Like there's barely any equipment used in it. If you've got a few jars and a knife, flipping board, and a pair of scissors would probably do, you got a lot of the stuff that you need for it. So that's our like sort of very, 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 very entry level. If someone's like, I don't know anything about this stuff. And with all our courses, we include quite a lot of like additional links. If people are like, I would like to nerd out about that particular thing, we, you know, tend to include like podcasts and articles and other resources that people can look into, because we also don't want to reinvent the wheel, and we want to big up people who have other very cool stuff going on. So that's one. And then we also, another kind of like really beginner friendly one would be Plant Ally's 13 Moons, where we look at a plant every lunar cycle. And we go into that like a real deep dive, so people can do back to that experiential stuff that we've talked about before. And that's when people can do 100% online, but we also have in-person sessions at the farm in Lauriston. So that would be a very cool way to get involved in the farm if you're ever in Edinburgh. And then folk have got an interest in foraging. We have our Wild Things course, which again also online and in person, and we call that a year of wild food and medicine. And we go into 40 plants that are really abundant to forage in Scotland and in the UK. And we have had like a number of people from, I think there was somebody in Oregon actually did the course. We had a whole complicated thing because we post out mystery herbs, and we had to like tell her daughter what the mystery herbs were so that she could get them, so they were still a mystery for her. It was very adorable and very lovely. So if you have a possible stooge we can send secret information to, that's also an option. And that we book that from autumn to early spring. And then most recently, we've been offering a community herbalism course, which is called Grassroots Herbal Foundations. And that's really, it's like a really amazing course. And what we're doing with that is we're bringing together like so many diverse elements of herbal medicine framed for folk to use in a community context, but also with an overtly political take on community health and on herbal medicine. So in my mind, I imagine this as being someone's like a home herbalist. They're like that person in their friendship group, or they are the broader friendship group who's like always suggesting teas to people, making them balms, like making suggestions of like fermented things that you could make, or any or all of the above. And you do that for your friends and family, but you maybe wanted to just go a little bit further into your community, be that like a geographical community or a community of interest, and just want the confidence and skills to bring together all these amazing strands of herbal medicine and actually go out there and give people information about herbal medicine. And for a lot of our students, that's very much in a community kind of workshops kind of context. So we do a lot around setting up projects, working with volunteers, planning workshops, like evaluating workshops. And it's amazing. Some of our students actually, whilst they're on the course, they do their workshop planning module and assignment, and then actually take that physical workshop plan and take it out into the wild and deliver a workshop for a group that they're already involved with. And that's been really amazing because it means that they can come back and like feedback to ourselves and to their peers, and like how that's felt both before, during and after delivering the workshop, and how they would develop that. So it's a really, really amazing thing for students to be able to do. It also has a lot of really practical elements to it. We've got a remedy making module. We look at sensory herbalism. So there's a lot of embodiment practices there to look at how we interact with the plants. And then we do have quite like kind of more what you might think of as like the academic end of things. So we've got herbal therapeutics, which looks at different body systems and the effects of stress, and then herbs that people might choose to use in hopefully like a nuanced way. I think one of our big strands is about people trying to use the nuance of the different ways that plants are and that plants are in the world, and use that to inform what they might give to people or what they might suggest to people. So yeah, it's a huge course. You tell I'm quite excited about it. And we've had a lot of amazing students come through. Like Soraya said earlier, we do get like a fair number of students who are working in healthcare themselves already. And I think it was you said, Nicole, about the people wanting to sort of add things to what they offer that complements it and that is actually really useful for the folk that they work with and the folk in their community. So yeah, that's been like a big, really exciting course for us. We take bookings for that from May to September each year, and I do have we have a little function on the course website if folk want to book a little call about the course just to like find out a bit more, ask some questions. They can do that. We can do that by Zoom. It doesn't have to be a phone call. So that's an option for folk as well. But yeah, very, very excited by the Grassroots Herbal Foundations course, and basically there being more community herbalists in the world. Because at the minute it feels like home herbalism and practitioner herbalism are sort of seen as being the only options. But there's loads of people out there who are already being community herbalists. They just maybe aren't calling themselves that, or that isn't in their mind of what they are. And we're really, really, really interested to make that like more of a thing that people can do. And yeah, that's another one. People do that 100% online or can come to some in-person elements of that as well. So yeah, that is our in a not very much of a nutshell courses options.
No, I love that. I think it sounds like such an important offering, and like, you know, like through the threads of this conversation, it is like those kind of like community organizing skills that just like constantly come up, right? Like, I don't want to say that herbalism is the easy stuff, but it's like building relationships and building trust with people, and, you know, like navigating like class dynamics and all the other dynamics in the world. And, you know, how do you fund projects? And like, yeah, like this kind of, I've been thinking of doing a kind of like train the trainers type thing for people that want to like build their facilitation confidence with teaching and stuff. But it sounds like your course is already doing that, and the fact that people get a bit of like opportunity to then run a workshop somewhere is like, yeah, that's awesome. I'm so sorry about time. It's just my little one is going to return from nursery imminently. So just to finish, I just want to say thank you so much for your time and energy today. And yeah, I will put everything you've mentioned in the show notes. But yeah, where can people find you or learn more?
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. People can sign up to our newsletter through our website, which is grassrootsremedies.co.uk, to like hear about all the latest stuff that we're up to, and including courses and volunteering and various offerings. And as Catriona said, you can book a 15-minute course call with her if you're interested in studying. And yeah, if you find yourself in near Edinburgh, then come along to like a herb garden volunteering session. It'd be really, really lovely to meet folks. And yeah, I guess if you directly want to support our clinic, then you could maybe buy some of our products on our website. But yeah, just wanted to say thanks so much for having us on, Nicole, and thanks so much for all the work that Solidarity Apothecary is like continuing to do. Big inspiration for us as well.
Oh, bless you. Pleasure. Well, yeah, thanks so much. I hope you both have a really good day, and yeah, just like huge respect for everything you're doing. I wish you were like literally not the other side of these islands. I feel like very far away from Scotland, but yeah. Okay, awesome. And yeah, really lovely to meet you too, Catriona, as well. I still haven't forgiven Soraya for stealing one of my besties up to Scotland, so we'll let that go. But yeah, thanks again for your time.
Cheers, Nicole. Bye-bye.
All right. Cheers. Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to the Frontline Herbalism podcast. You can find the transcript, the links, all the resources from the show at solidarityapothecary.org/podcast.